Hello everyone. When I was first commissioned for this job to be the artist of this team, my role was more or less the box in cursive in here to ask the questions which would make the archaeologists ask their own questions. They might find certain materials. I was to ask about the materials that you need to supplement them. The difference between sites, as was talked about, and the most important one that I'm going to talk about now is even if the premise appears explained by archaeology, what logically is not. Very important to myself was to be a pest, which is the one at the end. What can an artist do to upset your delusion of comfort? So any rusted ideas, if you like, see if I could ask the questions or make the visualizations which would upset them. So I apologize for being a pest. The first commission I got was to be about the making of a logboard. And the very first question that was asked in a small committee, we were having a conversation and somebody proposed, well, where do you get the logs? Well, not here, not in the delta. The trees there were not thick enough, they were not tall enough, they were not straight enough. And this question rattled the people asking the question, and it was concluded that these people therefore must have mounted expeditions to areas of higher ground, perhaps closer to the modern province of Brabant, cut down the trees suited for the job. And immediately this puts you in visual territory as well, because how do you get there? Well, via water, in a boat that you have already prepared. And how many people would you have with you? Well, likely not many, because you're going with at least one canoe less. And where do you camp when you're away? Probably in temporary accommodation. So all those things are incorporated into this reconstruction painting, which therefore became a very narratively complex version of a concept that you have often seen visualized before. Neolithic people going about their ways. In most illustrations you might have seen in the past, they will have a house, they will have a field of crops, they will have farm animals, they will go out hunting occasionally, and in another corner they might be cutting log boats, and most likely somewhere in a corner they'll have a wife cooking them a meal at a campfire. But not this. This shows toil and it shows investment. It shows the plans that people had to make to live in an environment where nature was dominant, was the dominant force. So, do you waste all that energy just to cut a log? Do you take home other things as well? The follow-up illustration became this. Very subtly in this one of the log boats has got a fresher colour than the other. But these boats are loaded with skins, packed into square bundles, antlers, and although suggested, but too small to depict, perhaps old flints that they were taking home. So you get this image of water that flows and birds that tweet and trees that rustle and a sun that rises and settles, and there's no clocks to mark time, so the people are only living in the moment. This, of course, is a visual construct, because at a very early meeting of the team, I proposed that in order to market to a larger public the subject of our research, we ought to forego with the very unsexy label Vlaardingen culture. I instead suggested that we would either call them the Delta people or perhaps the swamp dwellers. I am talking about marketing here. Personally, I consider this my finest painting in the series that you're going to see because it goes a long way in marketing Vlaardingen culture to a larger audience. I did this, as you can see, by mimicking these 19th century paintings which conveyed the majesty of nature. Paintings of Native Americans in canoes or trappers out on the wild rivers, which were all supposed to put a purely aesthetic awe in the viewer's minds. In modern times, this kind of aesthetic still exists, because if you've seen this film, you might see the connection between my painting really is a direct inspiration, even though mine is set in the Western Netherlands. If you think of my painting, or if you believe it to be a majestic view of an unspoiled Dutch prehistoric landscape, you have to trust me that I've tricked you. I've tricked you into thinking, so it's all visual language, and it impresses upon you tones and shapes, wording to you what you're supposed to think. And I can twist that knife any way I want. So when the project asked for a drawing of a composite necklace, this is what I came up with. Something that is not what you expect. So these are a version of the Delta people, which in a sense is a fantasy, but so is calling them Vlaardingen people. It stops you imagining what they were to themselves. Mothers, daughters, skin and bones, hair, teeth, and some grass. So the next illustration I was asked to do, or one of the next illustrations, was to show the exterior of the Vlaardingen house yard. This is my brief. This is everything that everybody wanted, well, the experts wanted me to put into the illustration, which is too much, because I can't incorporate all of these, because in real life you have a focus too. I mean, I'm looking at you, but I cannot say what's happening behind me. And I will focus on what I presently need, which is you again. To take the example, if I need to find my passport at home, I won't remember where I've put it. There's things that you don't need to focus on. Also, by listing all these possibilities, even by listing all these possibilities, you cannot ever really hope to inhabit the Neolithic world, but you can circle around it and move along its edges. And that's what this illustration does, which, by the way, for most of the people of the team now is also a new one. They haven't seen this one yet. It shows the terrain around a Vlaardingen dwelling, but looking in from the outside. I do not show the front door, which is there on the left somewhere. I do not show what the farmers are doing, what the people there are doing. Sorry, I call them farmers for the people. I only show the work abandoned. I show the remains of work half done. I would also like you to point you out that everything in this illustration has been designed without symmetry. Everything is lopsided. Everything is longer on one side than it is on the other side. I've tilted the roof of the farm forward. Everything is uneven because the sensibility that we have towards balance in art is a classical concept. So it's several years younger than this. So again, this was the brief. This is what I decided to keep. You can spend lots of time on the edges of this long lost world, but you can yet never manage to get close. But as the title of my talk implied, an image says more than 1,000 words. So when it came to illustrating the importance of dairy management near the Steinhoff settlement, I took it to task to soothe the viewer into something they at least feel familiar with. For this appears a very Dutch scene, a wide vista filled with cows, but it is very different because these cows are grazing in salt marshes. And there are birds, spoonbills, which we might nowadays only see flock together in zoos. In fact, I saw them recently. The only place I've ever seen them is in the Arctic. And where do the people live? They live on dunes. So even though I have made you, hopefully, feel comfortable in this scene, in fact, you couldn't be, because of all the old things you see in this image, or in these images, they are, in fact, new to you.